Christian Eckes could be headed to Kaulig Racing in 2025, and NASCAR's already in talks to go to San Diego in 2026. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show those really quickly. First, going to take a look at some paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2024 Sports Clip Throwback Scheme, which is a tribute scheme to Ray Hendrick. I absolutely love this paint scheme. The colors look incredible. I think Sports Clips did a great job on this one. It looks fabulous. It looks amazing. And I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Shane Van Gisbergen's 2024 Acceptance Insurance Scheme that we'll see this weekend at Darlington and also, I believe, next weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I like the colors of it. We've already seen this scheme in the past. I do think the colors look pretty cool, though, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Michael McDowell's 2024 Color Tech Scheme that we'll see in the Southern 500. Scheme's okay in my opinion. I think front rows have better paint schemes overall this year, to be honest, but I do think it looks solid, and hopefully Michael McDowell can have a good run this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jesse Love's 2024 Sam CRa scheme that we'll see next weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I like the blue and I like the white. I think there's some good things about this for sure, and pretty cool to see a new sponsor working with Jesse Love this weekend. The next paint scheme and the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Weatherman's 2024 Brand South Africa scheme that we'll see this weekend and next weekend at Atlanta. I think colors look solid in my opinion. I think it's interesting sponsorship for sure, but pretty interesting to see that Brand South Africa will be sponsoring Kyle Weatherman this weekend. It's a very interesting thing for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Darlington Purse money. So every time you have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for that event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $8,644,143, and for the Xfinity race, it's $1,033,907. It's some solid money for the Cup race for the Southern 500. Obviously, that goes to the charter teams and a little bit uncharted money for MBM. And then, of course, for the Xfinity Series race, there is a decent amount of money there as well. It's very interesting for sure. I'm glad to see there's a little bit of more money coming in for Xfinity for the weekend. I think it's very interesting for sure and pretty good money nonetheless for the Cup and Xfinity races at Darlington. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the shark fin. As there was reported by Bob Pockers on late Wednesday afternoon that the rear window air deflector, also known as the shark fin, will be used at all intermediate and super speedways, but not short tracks or road courses throughout the rest of 2024. This will go this weekend at the Southern 500, where it will be required for teams to use the shark fin. Obviously, the shark fin really did not work at Daytona. Granted, you're not going to be going as fast at tracks like Darlington, but watch them out in some shape or form that there somehow is a way that there's going to end up being a flip. I wouldn't be surprised or shocked with how crazy this season has been that there could end up being a flip this weekend at Darlington. We've had a lot of flips recently with the next-gen car. Considers a turtle shell on the bottom of these cars, but cars are going to end up flipping. If we do continue to see this issue going forward, NASCAR will have to address it, but I feel like right now they really don't 1,000% have to address the situation, but they're probably eventually going to have to address this situation, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about David Starr. As it was reported by Joseph Strigley that David Starr will drive the 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend at Darlington. David Starr's made select starts so far this year in the number 1407 car for SS Greenlight Racing. I also believe that he has driven for Joey Gase Motorsports so far this year as well. David has a lot of experience, and I believe this car is locked into the race, if I remember correctly. So hopefully David Starr can have a solid and good run, but let's be real and honest, I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire. So hopefully he can prove me wrong and have a strong run this weekend. But like I said, I'm not really expecting him to set the world on fire. I think he sadly will unfortunately probably nonetheless struggle this weekend at Darlington, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dawson CRa. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Dawson CRa will drive the 74 for Mike Harmon Racing this weekend at Darlington. Dawson CRa last year made a ton of starts for Mike Harmon Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and had some pretty impressive runs with this team, qualified very impressively, and was at times pretty fast in practice sessions as well. I think Dawson CRa will do okay, but I'm not expecting this car to set the world on fire considering it's had trouble qualifying for races this year. They've had multiple different drivers get behind the wheel, and it's been a little bit of a struggle for the team throughout the season. I really hope he can run well with the team. I think Dawson is a very talented race car driver, and it would be pretty awesome and cool to see him have the chance and opportunity to make the field. We'll see what he does, and we'll see what Dawson CRa can do this weekend at Darlington. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rajah Caruth. As Rajah Caruth confirmed a couple days ago that he'll be running the Cars Tour race later this evening at Florence Raceway with R&S Race Team. Rajah Caruth, I believe, has driven in the Cars Tour in the past, and it's really incredible to see that he'll get to compete against guys like your Carson Quaffles, like Kevin Harvick, like Dale Jr., and we've even seen drivers sometimes like Corey Hine come out and run in the Cars Tour as well. I think legitimately Rajah could have a chance and opportunity to win this race. I think Rajah is a very talented race car driver. He's had success in late models in the past. He's competed in some pretty big late model events in the past as well. And I do think that Rajah is going to have a solid chance and a great opportunity to be very, very competitive. So I really hope he can do a solid job this weekend and run up front and be competitive for sure. I'd like to see him do well. We'll see what he ends up doing, and we'll see what he can do this weekend at Florence, which will be later tonight. Hopefully he can have a solid and strong and great performance this weekend at Florence. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Katherine Legge. As it was announced earlier this week that Katherine Legge will drive the 51 for Dale Coyne Racing during a doubleheader in IndyCar at the Milwaukee Mile. This has been rumored that Katherine Legge was going to try to finish most of the rest of the year for Dale Coyne Racing, but obviously it wasn't confirmed at the time that she was going to be running. But I do think that Katherine Legge will have a decent performance. I know she crashed out very early in the race at Gateway, but she also doesn't have the most experience on oval. She is more of a road course driver, let's be real and honest, which is probably why she has unfortunately struggled driving for a team like Dale Coyne Racing or other organizations on ovals, outside, of course, maybe running the Indy 500. But I do think that Katherine will have a solid performance, all things considered. I think that with Dale Coyne, sometimes they do show up and surprisingly sometimes run very well. So I do think there's a great chance and a strong possibility that we could see Katherine Legge have a great run. Hopefully Katherine can do a solid and great job with Dale Coyne. Again, this is a great opportunity for her because I do think maybe she wants to go full-time in the future, though Toby Sowery's in the running to go full-time at IndyCar at the moment. So we'll see what Katherine Legge can do this weekend with Dale Coyne Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christian Rasmussen. As it was announced Wednesday morning that Christian Rasmussen will drive the 20 for Ed Carpenter Racing for the final 3 races of 2024. That will include the doubleheader at Milwaukee and will also be the season finale, I believe, next weekend as well. Now, why is Christian Rasmussen running the final 3 races? Because originally Ed Carpenter was going to drive the final 3 races of this year. The reason they're putting Ed Carpenter behind the wheel of this, not Ed Carpenter, Christian Rasmussen behind the wheel, is because Christian has been pretty solid on ovals and was very impressive in the Indy 500 earlier this year. And Ed Carpenter feels like that Christian is going to give him the best chance and opportunity to be able to go out and compete for wins potentially. And they're really in the battle for the leader circle. They're right in that top 22 position, which is why they've made this decision. And I think it's a really good decision, all things considered, to have Christian behind the wheel for the final 3 races of the year. I do think he is generally going to be very competitive in this race. I think he's going to have a good chance and opportunity, and I think he could get a couple top 10s. Ed Carpenter's equipment has been a little hit or miss in recent years, but I do think he's going to have a solid chance and a strong opportunity to be very competitive. I think it's a great move and good decision from Ed Carpenter Racing to put him behind the wheel. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rafael Matos. As it was shockingly confirmed by Rafael Matos himself that he'll be driving an 87 for Peterson Racing Group in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2 weeks at Watkins Glen. Rafael Matos, for those who do not know, competes full-time in the Trans Am TA2 Series, where he's won multiple championships there, and did compete full-time in IndyCar for a couple years, where unfortunately his best finish was 4th. This is kind of a surprising move. It's kind of like Juan Montoya coming out of retirement and racing in the NASCAR Cup Series with 2311 Racing. Maybe a Carl Busch come back at some point. But I think Rafael Matos, could be someone that could be very solid this week. And I think Rafael is a talented race car driver. And Peterson Racing Group, of course, will be working with RCR in a pretty big way. They get their stuff from ECR, which RCR and Kaulig could be merging potentially. We're not sure on that one. But I do think Rafael is talented, and I think he could do very solid. I think he's going to be a contender for sure, and I think he will have a solid chance and opportunity to be up front and maybe at least have a top 15, top 20, though he does have to qualify his way in because the 87 car does not have a lot of owner's points currently at this particular moment, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. As it was confirmed yesterday that Joey Logano will drive the 15 car for AM Racing this weekend at Darlington. This will be Joey Logano's second Xfinity start of 2024. Panini America will be sponsoring Joey Logano this weekend. Joey did make his Xfinity first start of the 2024 season earlier this year with the team at the Chicago Street Course, where he really has been the only guy this year who's done solidly with the AM Racing group. Hailie Deegan completely struggled, where she only had a 4 or 5 top 20s the whole entire season, and she lost her ride. And then obviously Josh Berry's come in, and he struggled in the few races he ran, and then lost Allen, of course, he ended up crashing out. I think that, and Gustine, of course, had an engine failure. I think Joey Logano may give them their best shot and opportunity to be competitive, but let's be real frank and honest. I'm not expecting Joey Logano to set the world on fire. I think he might get a top 20, which would be kind of a stretch. I know, like I said, he got a top 10, but Logano is still one of the best drivers in NASCAR today. So it does make sense if he was to get the chance and opportunity to run up front. So I do think he could do decent. But again, I'm not expecting him to really set the world on fire. I hope he can do well with the team and really help build a portfolio for the team and organization. But like I said, I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire. I think he will unfortunately end up struggling in a pretty big way. And sadly, I don't think he will run very well this weekend. I hope Logano can prove me wrong, but I'm not expecting him to run really well this weekend with AM Racing, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about extra practice and tires. As it was reported by Bob Pockers that NASCAR has added extra practice for the Charlotte Roval because of the new configuration that they are going to be running for 2024. There will be a 50-minute session for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, which goes up from 20 minutes with the group sessions, and there will be 20 minutes times 2. So the Cup Series will have 40 minutes altogether for each group, meaning we'll have around 80 minutes altogether of practice for the NASCAR Cup Series. In addition to that, Cup teams will get extra 20-minute session at Watkins Glen. Why? Well, there is going to be a new tire that is going to be used. And according to what we're hearing, it sounds like there's going to be about 4 to 5 seconds of tire fall. When I hear the word extra tire fall, that is really exciting for Watkins Glen. Let's be real and honest. The race at Watkins Glen last year was not really good for the NASCAR Cup Series. I feel like you need fall off because there was no fall off last year. 4 seconds of tire fall off is going to bring tire management into it, and the guys that can manage your tires very, very well, I think are going to be out there competing for the win. Looking at a driver like Shane Van Gisbergen. But also, I love the fact that we're at least getting a little bit of extra practice time, because I think the more practice time you can get these, especially these younger drivers, I think the better it is going to make those kind of guys. So I really hope they can all run well, and I'm very excited to see that they're making this move. This is a great decision overall, all things considered, and very happy to see that there'll be extra practice time for the Cup Series. I think it's pretty awesome stuff nonetheless, and pretty great to see, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Iowa Speedway. As it was reported by Adam Starr and a couple other major reporters that Iowa Speedway will not be repaved anymore next season from where it currently stands. They apparently had talked to all the NASCAR teams about not repaving the racetrack. They said they got a lot of really good feedback from NASCAR teams and the NASCAR drivers as well that raced there earlier this year, and they decided to not go ahead and repave it because of that reason. Now, I'll be real and honest here. I think it did put on a solid show for the NASCAR Cup Series, and I think the Xfinity Series put on a really solid product, despite the fact the Xfinity Series did have some tire issues early in the weekend, and the Cup Series did have tire issues. They were still able to get it in. That being said, I am a little shocked and surprised that they're not repaving for IndyCar. Let's be real and honest. If you watch the IndyCar race at Iowa Speedway, it did not put on a really good show. The product was not good in my opinion. The racing sucked overall. There wasn't really any passing whatsoever. And if you got up on that second lane, you were going to drop like a fly and might end up wrecking. So I feel like they should have repaved Iowa for the IndyCar guys. I get they didn't want to finish it, and I get it made a solid show for the NASCAR Cup Series, but I feel like if they would have just repaved the whole entire track, I think that would have made a lot more sense. Again, I get why they decided not to do it for the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series, but at the same token, at the same time, they absolutely should have done it because in my personal opinion, I do believe that they should have repaved the track for the people like IndyCar, who's been there for many years, trying to build it up. I do hope in the future they change their minds and do go ahead and repave it, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lee Diffie. Now, Lee Diffie earlier this week was on the Dale Jr. download, or basically the reloaded version of the Dale Jr. download with, I believe, Carly Gabehart and a couple other people. And Lee Diffie was asked a lot of questions and wanted to send a message clear to a lot of fans, because there have been some fans, mostly minority, but there have been a small number of fans that have been against Lee Diffie. Lee Diffie did say that he did a lot of his homework and wanted to send a message saying that he cares about the sport and is wanting to put the work into it. Lee Diffie did an excellent job on his first day covering NBC on the NASCAR side. He is one of the best commentators, lead play-by-play announcers that we have seen cover races in a very long time. This is no disrespect to Rick Allen. I still think Rick Allen has gotten better over the years, but Lee Diffie in one race just outperformed everything that Rick Allen has done so far this year. And I think having him cover the whole entire rest of the year, that being Lee Diffie, is going to be really huge for NBC, all things considered. And I think it's just overall a fantastic and great thing that they are doing this. I think we're going to see a fantastic broadcast going forward. And Lee Diffie, I think, just really brought the energy to the booth was kind of missing. I think the call at the end was great. I think how he called Harrison Burton getting the win, who we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. I think it was a phenomenal and fantastic call. So it's really great stuff, all things considered, for sure. And I think Lee Diffie will continue providing all that stuff that I think fans are looking for, which is fantastic and great broadcasting. So I'm really happy nonetheless about this. And Lee Diffie, it's cool to see that he's sending a message basically saying, yeah, I want to do the best I can. And I think he did absolutely a fantastic and great job during the Cup Series race. I think he'll do a good job calling the rest of the championship throughout this year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba Wallace was asked a question by Bob Pockrass about something that he was sent. Now, Bubba Wallace over the week at Daytona was absolutely very frustrated that he most likely will not make the playoffs unless, of course, he most likely does get a win at Darlington this weekend for the Southern 500, considering how strong Chris Buescher was the last summer here. Now, Bubba Wallace was on the Dale Jr. download and basically talked about how he got a text from Michael Jordan after the race had concluded, basically telling Bubba that a lot of things he won do always come at a price. And Bob Pockrass had asked him a question about this. Well, Bubba says that he usually gets a text from Michael Jordan encouraging him and telling him to keep going. It is really cool to see that Michael Jordan is there trying to support Bubba in any way, shape, or form. Because Bubba Wallace, in my opinion, having Michael Jordan in his corner is absolutely huge. And you look at Bubba Wallace this year in 2024, he has had a very solid and strong year, all things considered. He's had 5 top 5 so far and a career year in top 10s with 11. He's still got to work on getting the laps led number up. He's at about 100 currently at the moment, which I think, depending on how much speed he can bring, I think he will be very competitive. And to be fair, you look at his stats at Darlington, Bubba has been pretty solid at Darlington Raceway in the past. So while I don't think he's going to go out there and be the guy who could go to victory lane, I could see him sneaking his way and maybe somehow getting a win. You never know, especially with how competitive this series can be sometimes. I think it's just cool to see that Michael is involved and really wants to help Bubba grow as a driver. And I think Bubba has really grown as a driver in recent years. And it's good to see that Michael is wanting to help him continue to grow as a driver in this series. So all things considered, this is a really great message to hear and see, and pretty awesome to see that Michael Jordan is trying to help Bubba Wallace out in a pretty awesome and big way, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about practice and qualifying. Now, a big question that a lot of people have been asking about is, will there be a change to the practice and qualifying format for 2025 with Amazon and TNT coming in and with the schedules finally being released, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit? Well, according to Bob Hockers, it sounds like the same practice qualifying format that we've had for about 2 or 3 years now will be continuing in 2025. Now, all the new venues going on the schedule and the change track venues will probably have longer practice sessions in different qualifying formats, but they are not changing for 2025. I'm going to be real and honest, I don't agree with this move. I feel like that they need to change the qualifying format for 2025. Personally, I don't think you need the group qualifying sessions anymore. I think we should go from the fastest to the slowest. You can start qualifying by where the teams are at in the points and do the metric for that, but I feel like these group sessions need to go away going into next year. The other thing is, when it comes to practice, 45 to 50-minute practice session every week. I feel like if you give these teams 50 minutes to get on the track and get used to driving these cars, I think you'll have a lot better of a racing product, and the racing quality will be so much better. Just look at Iowa. The racing quality was pretty good, and we had a pretty long practice session. Yes, we had a lot of tire issues during that weekend, but having extra practice does not hurt, in my opinion, and you could put on a pretty solid and fantastic and great product. I really wish NASCAR would stop limiting the amount of practice we're having. You've had team owners who have said publicly that they want more practice. Brad Keselowski has said it. Dale Jr. has said it. I think Denny Hamlin hasn't said it, of course, because he feels like 2311 probably will fade off just a little bit. But I think adding a little bit more practice for NASCAR, at least on the Cup and even the Xfinity side and truck side especially, and getting rid of these group sessions, I think would be a fantastic decision. Are they going to do that? I'm not entirely sure, which it sounds like they're not going to, which I think is disappointing. I personally think if they wanted to have a more successful sport, they would go ahead and have a little bit more practice added, in my honest opinion. I think it would be better for the sport, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jeb Burton, Kyle Sieg, and Cesar Bacarella. As it was announced on Wednesday early afternoon that Jeb Burton, Kyle Sieg, and Cesar Bacarella have all been penalized 20 points and 5 playoff points, and their crew chiefs have all been fined $25,000. Now, why were all three of these drivers handed penalties? Well, during pre-race tech and pre-race inspection, NASCAR found that they were messing with the rear bumper covers. NASCAR has been going in-depth, and they've been penalizing drivers for messing with the rear bumpers and the rear spoilers and all that stuff to try to get a little bit of an advantage. We saw Parker Kligerman get a pretty big penalty where he got a 20-point penalty, which dropped him from being 36 points up to 16 points up. I think he did gain some points on the cutoff line going into this weekend when we do race at Darlington for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But I think this is going to be a huge penalty, especially for some of these smaller teams. The 45 team is not really high in the owners' points currently at the moment. And Kyle Sieg's had a decent year. And Jeb Burton, who we already knew was going to have to win a race anyways to make the playoffs, this is unfortunately going to affect a team like Jordan Anderson Racing in a pretty big way. Now, none of these teams, from what I understand, have appealed it. You had to appeal, I believe, yesterday to not have a chance. And they're not planning to appeal it at this current moment because there's no way they'd be able to win it. Again, $25,000 for a crew chief, especially in the lower series for some of these smaller teams, is disappointing. But again, NASCAR has been pretty clear. They don't want you messing with this kind of stuff. So I'm not entirely the most shocked and surprised to see the NASCAR is basically kind of saying, yeah, we're not going to let you mess with this kind of stuff because otherwise you're probably going to go ahead and get a penalty. So again, NASCAR doesn't want these drivers messing with it, unfortunately, which I think is a good decision, all things considered. And overall, don't mess with the rear bumpers of these cars because other than that, you're likely going to get a penalty for messing with that kind of stuff if you do end up messing with it. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. As I believe it is reported by Speed Cafe or VA Sleuth that Shane Van Gisbergen could still make some NASCAR Xfinity Series starts in 2025. He did mention this during his press conference that even though he will be competing full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series with Trackhouse Racing full-time in the number 88 car, he still plans to make some select Xfinity Series starts next year. Now, where could SVG end up running next year? Well, I think there's really only two organizations that I could think of that he could end up running at. The first one is Kaulig Racing. He drove for Kaulig Racing full-time this year in the number 97 car, has picked up 3 victories. I could see him running on some O's with that organization, but I'm not exactly sure if that is going to be the team. The only other team that I could think of is Junior Motorsports and JRM, We know Connor Zilic is going full-time in the number 88 car with Junior Motorsports. And remember, he, of course, works with Trackhouse Racing, that being Connor Zilic. So I could definitely see him going to JRM and maybe driving the 8 car or revamped number they haven't decided at this point. He could also drive the 1 car for JRM. And honestly, if you put him in a Junior Motorsports car, I think he will have a more realistic chance and shot and opportunity to be very, very competitive. So I would love to see SVG get the chance and opportunity to drive with JRM and get that chance, because I think Dale Jr. really likes Shane a lot, and I think it'd be a pretty excellent and great move to see this end up happening. So I really hope that if he does run in the Xfinity Series next year part-time, I think you have to put him in a Junior Motorsports car, because he will give you a better shot and opportunity to be very, very competitive. So like I said, I hope it ends up happening, and I really hope that Shane gets to run part-time with a team like JRM, not Kaulig. I know Kaulig really likes Shane a lot. They're, of course, placing him with Daniel Dye going into next year, but in my honest opinion, I think they should do that where they go and race there. Let him race with JRM, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Truex. Now, we're going to have to be talking about the Xfinity Series schedule here in just a little bit. But Ryan Truex, about an hour after the schedule came out, he put a tweet indicating that he would love to race at all 33 NASCAR Xfinity Series races in 2025 and wants to race full-time next season. Ryan Truex currently does not have a full-time seat for 2025. There have been rumors and speculation that Ryan Truex could run part-time, with Martin being over there. They could be splitting the car for select races once again in the 2025 season. It sounds like, according to everything I have heard, that William Sawalich, Taylor Gray, and Brandon Jones are all expected to be over at Joe Gibbs Racing full-time for the 2025 season, meaning that Ryan Truex most likely will not be full-time. I did see that Dale Jr. was kind of tweeting about maybe Ryan getting a chance and opportunity to be full-time with his own organization, but I don't think he's going to go over there next year, to be honest. But I 100% agree. What is it going to take for this guy to get the chance and opportunity? Ryan Truex has proven himself. He's got 2 wins so far this year. He won at Dover, and then he won at Daytona. And I think that he's won basically the same amount of races as drivers like Justin Allgaier, who's considered a championship contender. He's won more races than Cole Custer, who a lot of people consider to be the favorite for the championship. He's won the same amount of races as Sam Mayer. He's won the same amount of races or more races than Riley Herbst this season. And the only driver this year that's won more races is Shane Van Gisbergen, who's going up to the Cup Series next year. It blows my mind that a driver like Ryan Truex, who in my opinion is one of the most talented drivers we have seen in the lower series. He's kind of like a late bloomer. He's kind of like his brother Martin. He's kind of like a late bloomer, and it takes time. This is a guy that's worked his butt off for a very, very long time, and it's disappointing to see that at this moment a team has not decided to put him full-time. I guess sponsorship and funding is a major thing, but at the same time, I really feel like that if you're a team looking at a driver to put behind the wheel, you have got to get this guy behind the wheel full time, because he's going to give you the chance and opportunity that you're looking for to be very, very competitive. So I really hope it ends up happening, and I do hope we get to see Ryan Truex in the near future go full time, because personally, in my opinion, he is one of the best drivers that we've seen come through the ranks in the last decade or so. He's very talented and deserves to be full time, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the 2026 NASCAR schedule. As there was a report by Adam Stern the day before the schedule got released, that NASCAR is already looking to expand domestically and globally in 2026 with their schedule. NASCAR has been so innovative and creative with their schedules in recent years and recent seasons. Since 2021, they've been making a lot of moves. We brought Circuit Americas on the schedule in 2021. We also brought Road America on the schedule for a couple of years there for a few seasons. We also got Bristol Dirt on the schedule, which while a lot of people weren't the biggest fan of Bristol Dirt, I think it was pretty cool to see that. And now going into 2025, Gateway is going to be in the playoffs next year, and they're going to Mexico City. And there have been a lot of rumors and speculation about, of course, going to an area like San Diego, which we're going to talk about near the end of this episode. But they're also in talks and discussions as well to go to Interlagos and race in Brazil. I think racing internationally and expanding domestically, maybe more street courses, for example, and making moves in that way, shape, or form, I think is absolutely huge. And I really do hope that we do get to see the chance and opportunity of NASCAR continuing to expand across the country. NASCAR needs to do this. Every other major sport out there that's considered a major sport has been expanding domestically and expanding globally as well. You look, of course, at the NFL. They're going to be playing at Sao Paulo, I believe, this upcoming week on Friday. You've obviously, of course, got MLB that's been playing in London. You've got, of course, the NHL who's expanding. You've got the NFL going to Mexico. I think expanding globally is going to be the way of the future going forward, and I think you're going to continue seeing stuff like this going forward into the future. So I hope that people are prepared and who people are listening, because I do think that you're going to continue seeing stuff like this going forward, whether you like it or not. I do believe that you're going to see stuff like this continue, where NASCAR is going to be making the moves they want to for 2026, which I think is overall very exciting, all things considered, for where everything is going to be headed in the next 10 to 15 years, especially. I think the schedule is going to look way different in the next 10 to 15 years than it does currently at the moment, which I think is very exciting for the fans, all things considered, because it kind of tells you that we really don't know where we're going to be going next, which I think is really exciting, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Southern California. Now, there's been a lot of talk and questions surrounding the future of Southern California. And Ben Kennedy was basically in the media calls with the 2025 schedule, which we're going to get to here in just a little bit. But Ben Kennedy says, while no race will be taking place in 2025 in Southern California, they are bullish about still being in the Southern California area. They are hoping that they can have a race in the Southern California area in 2026. Now, he did talk about the possibility of Auto Club maybe getting done in the future, which Auto Club Speedway is owned by NASCAR. They are planning to shrink that track down from a 2-mile racetrack to a half-mile track. They will not be racing their course in 2025. And obviously, it's still unknown at this point, currently at the moment, if they're going to be even racing there in 2026 as well. There's been rumors about warehouses being built on where the racetrack is exactly supposed to be at this point. And I do feel like at this moment, it's a little bit questionable if we are going to see a race in Southern California in 26. We'll get to the area that we might be going to, but remember, there were rumors about maybe racing at Long Beach, and literally those rumors lasted for about a week or so. They have been in talks and conversations to have a street race in the Long Beach area, and like I already mentioned and said, they aren't going to be racing at Long Beach, unfortunately, because Jerry Forsyth, who owned half the area, bought the whole entire area up and wants to keep it an IndyCar date going forward. So then you got to go to Auto Club, right, and look at where the future of Auto Club lies. I really want to see Auto Club end up being on the schedule for 2026. I think Auto Club then get it done. It could end up being the season finale. Obviously, you still got work to do on the package they've got, but I feel like giving it a chance and opportunity would be amazing to see. So I really hope they can finish up this project, get it done, so we can have the chance and opportunity to race at that track in 2026 and get the Auto Club short track project done. I think it needs to happen, because I do think the racing would end up being good. What they're doing is very interesting, all things considered, with the Auto Club short track. And then we'll get to San Diego here in a little bit, because they're in talks to race in San Diego for next year, or 2026, I should say. I really hope they can get it done, and we can get racing out there in the near future. We'll see what ends up happening and what moves they're going to make in regards to that when it comes to racing potentially in Southern California. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Harrison Burton. Now, earlier this week, there's been a lot of talk about Harrison Burton in his future. We do know that Harrison Burton, of course, will not be returning to the Wood Brothers Racing organization in 2025. Now, the big question is, where could Harrison Burton end up in 2025? According to reports of Moskinensi from Motorsports Wire and Kaulig Nation, which is a pretty solid YouTube channel, apparently Harrison Burton has had talks and conversations with Kaulig Racing and AM Racing for 2025. Also on the Stacking Pennies podcast as well, Harrison did acknowledge that he is close to finding a ride or something for the 2025 season at this point. Now, Harrison Burton, of course, got that big win, and obviously there are teams that are looking at him. Number one, of course, being Kaulig Racing, which I mentioned. Kaulig Racing is looking for a driver for the number 31 car going into 2025, as rumors and indications at this point are is that the team is going to be separating with Daniel Hemrick at the end of this year, as Daniel Hemrick is heavily rumored at the point to not be back with Kaulig Racing. There have been talk of him maybe going to their Xfinity program, but there's new rumors circulating that there might be a new Kaulig car being made for Rev Racing, and Nick Sanchez could end up going over there in 2025, with it not being a true Kaulig car, still being under the Rev Racing banner, but Kaulig Racing might end up still building those entries for next year. Harrison Burton Kaulig, though, would be very interesting. I think Harrison would be okay in that car, but he wouldn't set the world on fire. And does Ford want to give up on him? That is a big question. I know they picked up Sam Mayer and Sheldon Creed recently for going into next year, but I don't think those two are better drivers. Well, they're good drivers, but I don't know if they're going to really be able to replace Harrison when they do all eventually get up the Cup. You get to the one where I think it most likely happens, AM Racing. There's been a lot of smoke around this. A lot of reports have been coming out about this. One of the big rumors is that he's in the running for the 15 car for AM Racing next year. I think this is where he most likely ends up for 2025. I know, again, I mentioned Kaulig, and there have been talks about him going there, but I do think he likely ends up in AM Racing in 2025 at this point. I think AM Racing is not a great team, though, but if they bring someone with sponsorship and funding, and let's be real, Harrison Burton is a better driver than Hailie Deegan, so I think that he would do a much better job in that seat and would have a better opportunity and shot to be very, very competitive. So I really do think that this is where he's going to end up next year, is AM Racing. I could be wrong, and he ends up somewhere else for 2025, but I do think he'll either end up at AM Racing or most likely Kaulig. I think for sure, or can end up at Tricon. I've heard rumors of Tricon Garage as well, but I do think most likely going into the 2025 season, I do think you're going to see Harrison Burton end up at an organization like AM Racing for the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity season. I think him going back to Xfinity would definitely make a lot of sense. I think he does truly end up there for 2025. In my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Zay Smith once again. Now, a couple days ago on this channel, we had talked about the fact that, according to Kevin Harvick, he thinks that Zay Smith may not be headed over to Front Row Motorsports in 2025, because it seems like Ford is not very happy with Zay Smith currently at the moment. Well, that might be the different case, because according to Breakcar, who's a fellow YouTuber who also has association with the Daily Downforce as well, he reports that he still thinks that Zay Smith is still expected to drive for Front Row Motorsports in 2025, and Kevin Harvick might not be 100% telling the truth. Which I don't completely agree. Kevin Harvick a lot of times does tell the truth, but Breakcar is someone who has a lot of credibility in this industry, so I do trust some of the things that Breakcar ends up saying. Now, Zane also, it would be the move that I would make if I'm Front Row Motorsports. Zane has driven for Front Row Motorsports in the past. It has been very good at the organization. He won the Truck Series Championship, of course, back in 2022. And, of course, he drove part-time for them in 2023 as well. He did get a top 10 in the Co 600. And really, he's the best option you have. If you didn't go with Zane Smith, you had a guy like Chandler Smith, and we have heard Chandler Smith's name come up as a potential possibility to drive for this team next year, which Chandler, everything I'm hearing, he's probably not going back to Joe Gibbs Racing next year for 2025. So it definitely make a lot of sense for him to go here if Zane doesn't go here, but I'm not exactly sure that Chandler is really going to set the world on fire. And then, of course, you do have other drivers, like, I don't think Hailie Deegan's going here at this point. I don't think Hailie deserves full-time Cup ride, to be honest, in any shape or form, considering she did struggle in Xfinity, though she could still end up in Xfinity. There's rumors of her going to IndyCar at this point. Harrison could end up here, but I think he's going to AM Racing for 2025. I think you also could have gone a guy like Matt DiBenedetto, Ryan Preece, but Matt DiBenedetto, I think, will be back in Xfinity full-time, and Ryan Preece is heavily rumored to be going to RFK's third car next year. He could also go to Xfinity or Trucks, but I'm hearing he also could go to Rick Ware for next year. At this point, if you're Front Row, you should be able to make a decision. I don't care what they're seeing over there at Ford. They have no reason to be upset. You fumble Kyle Larson and you fumble Kyle Busch. And maybe at one point fumble Chase Elliott, we don't know. But I feel like that Zane Smith really is the best option and opportunity that you have to be very, very competitive. So I really hope that we do get to see him go over there next year. I trust a lot of things that Breakcar says. I think that this would be the guy I'd go with personally to be in that third car, because I think he's going to give you the best chance and opportunity to be super competitive and super fast from the get-go. I think he's a person that you have to choose if you want to be super competitive in my honest opinion, when it comes to 2025. I really hope he does truly end up there because I think Zane is going to give him the chance and opportunity to be really, really competitive, and it will be a solid team and organization if Zane truly does end up going there next season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Retzlaff. Now, if you've been on social media over the last couple days or so, you've probably seen the post from Daniel Trotta about Parker Retzlaff being on SiriusXM NASCAR radio. And apparently he says, in his XM radio, he says he probably wish he did things a little bit different. But he says that he is facing consequences for pushing Harrison Burton to the win. And according to what Parker Retzlaff has said, RCR and Chevrolet are very mad at Parker for pushing Harrison Burton to the win. Now, let's go back to the replay of this. Kyle Busch, of course, drives the number 8 car for Rich Schultz Racing in the Cup Series. Kyle Busch had a chance and opportunity to go out there and win the race. And obviously, we saw Parker push Harrison Burton, a Ford, to the victory. So Chevrolet, of course, in that situation, seemed to be very upset about that. But at the same time, I think it's absolutely BS. I think it's ridiculous that Chevy and RCR especially are very mad. It is not Parker Retzlaff's fault that you guys are not in the playoffs. I'm sorry. You guys have not given the equipment that Kyle Busch needs for most of the year. Yes, the last 3 races, they have been a lot more competitive. That is a fact. They've had more pace and they've had more speed. That being said, there is no reason that you should have to rely on a 21-year-old driver who is only in his second Cup start. His goal is to not push a driver who should have already been in the playoffs if they had not made the mistakes they've made this year into the playoffs. Not to mention, if you look at the choose situation, you know who chose behind Kyle? Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell, Kyle Busch wanted to push. He wanted Christopher Bell to push him. So why is RCR mad? What is he supposed to do? Lay off and go down and go behind Kyle? No, that would have caused a big wreck again, and we'd have had another overtime finish. So they have no reason to be upset. And Chevrolet and this manufactured stuff at super speedways really frustrates me. And the fact that what this is going to do actually is it's going to discourage drivers from going over to Chevrolet. And Beer Motorsports, they are a one-car organization that only runs at super speedways. And he's supposed to be performing for his sponsors. He's not supposed to be helping Richard Schultz Racing go out there and win a race at Daytona. He's supposed to be out there going and helping him. I get that he drives a RCR prepared car, but at the same time, the goal of a driver should be to go out there and win. This manufacturer loyalty stuff is complete BS in my opinion, and this kind of shit needs to go away going forward. And I feel like the NASCAR, they need to step in on this, because stuff like this is unacceptable. The fact that Chevy is going to punish Parker Retzlaff for this is freaking stupid in my opinion. And if I'm Parker, I'm getting out of Chevy. I'm going to Ford or Toyota. Yes, I know Ford's been pissed off with some of their drivers recently, but he's going to have a decent chance and an opportunity to be competitive in a Ford and even a Toyota as well. So go back to RSS at this point, because at this point, it seems like Chevy's mad. Or Jordan Anderson, switch over to Ford so he can stay with Jordan, because I think Parker has done great with the team. I feel bad for Parker. I think it's ridiculous that they're mad at him. I think it's complete bullshit in my opinion. And they have no reason to be mad, considering that Kyle Busch had so many other chances and so many other weeks to make it. And I think it's stupid that they're mad at him, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next big story of today's episode, as we're talking about the 2025 NASCAR schedule. Now, we talked about the 2025 NASCAR schedule on the channel fully. We went through all 3 series yesterday. Go check that video out. But we're going to talk about all the big notable changes that are on the schedule for 2025. The first big notable change, obviously a clash will take place at Bowman Gray in 2025 as it moves away from the Los Angeles area, and we'll be racing at Bowman Gray next season. The next big change, Circuit Americas moves to the 3rd race of 2025. The NASCAR Xfinity Series will be, the Truck Series will not be racing there. It will be only a 2-race weekend, as the Cup and Xfinity Series will be racing there at Circuit of the Americas. Homestead moves a little bit earlier in the year to the 6th race of the year, moves out of the playoffs for 2025 as we move to early in the year, as rumors and speculation is that Homestead Miami Speedway will be looking to put some renovations in so they can race there for the championship race going forward. Nashville moves to earlier in the year as well, to the first weekend of June. Makes a lot of sense in my opinion. Nashville will be a little cooler during that time, so it moves to the first weekend of June, right after the Coke 600. Then, of course, Michigan has also moved. But not only that, the Xfinity Series and Truck Series swapped their races. The Xfinity Series will not race in Michigan next year, while the Truck Series goes back to Michigan for the first time since, I believe, 2018. Then after that, the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series will race at Mexico City in 2025. This will be the first time the Xfinity Series has raced in Mexico City since, of course, the 2008 season when Kyle Busch won the race, and they'll be racing in Mexico City in 2025, which, by the way, Kyle Busch is good to go. According to Ben Kennedy, other reporters in the industry, Kyle Busch is good to go ahead and race in Mexico City in 2025. Dover has also changed for next year. It was moving to the middle of July where the Brickyard 400 weekend was last year. Dover will be moving a little bit later in the season as there will be a better chance for the race to not get rained out. Now, weather could definitely be a major factor for sure, but Dover will happen in 2025 later in the year. Watkins Glen is moving back out of the playoffs next year. It will happen on August 10th. The Truck Series will be going to Watkins Glen in 2025 for the first time ever. And I think that's really exciting. So you're going to have a triple header for Cup, Xfinity, and Trucks. Worldwide Technology Raceway and Gateway, it moves into the playoffs in 2025, where the NASCAR Xfinity Series will be racing here for the first time since 2010. The Truck Series will be going to New Hampshire instead of the Xfinity Series next year. Speaking of said, like New Hampshire. New Hampshire moves into the playoffs in a round of 12. The Truck Series will be racing at New Hampshire in 2025. Talladega will basically have some big changes as well as it moves to the round of 8. I am not a fan of this move personally. I don't think it should be in the round of 8 next year. It doesn't make sense in my opinion why it is in the round of 8 in the first place, but of course will be in the round of 8 in 2025. And then the other big change is Portland. There will be a change there. That moves to the end of August. That will be the second to last race of the regular season for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, so it moves to the second last race of the year. Then the other big change is you've got the Charlotte Roval for all three series next year. So the Cup, the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series will all be racing at the Charlotte Roval in 2025. Going to be very chaotic round of 8 for the Truck Series. And then, of course, for the Truck Series, it's going to have 25 races next year. So they're going up from 23 races to 25 races. And the playoffs are a lot more compacted. I absolutely love that move for sure. And then the other two big changes. The Truck Series will be racing at Lime Rock Park for the first time ever. I believe that the Xfinity Series did race there back in the 1980s once or twice, I remember correctly, but Lime Rock's had a lot of success with Trans Am Racing and has put on some pretty solid and great products in those series. And then the big exciting change for me is we're going back to Rockingham. I am so ecstatic about Rockingham Speedway being back on the NASCAR schedule next year. I think it is a fantastic move to put Rockingham on the schedule for 2025. I think the racing is going to be phenomenal. I think it's going to be amazing. Now, the Cup Series will not be racing there, but I think having the Xfinity and Truck Series race at Rockingham, I think is really phenomenal, and I think the racing will be very good, all things considered. I think this is a great move for sure, and really exciting, and very happy to see that Rockingham will be on the schedule. Overall, I think the schedules do look pretty solid. They don't look absolutely amazing for sure, but I do think they look extremely solid, and I cannot wait for next year. There's a lot of great changes, a lot of exciting things happening, and I cannot wait to see that NASCAR will be racing at Rockingham, Lime Rock, you name it. I think it's really exciting and really great to see overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about San Diego. Now, earlier this week on the channel, we had discussed about the potential possibility of NASCAR moving its street date potentially from Chicago in 2026 to the San Diego area for 2026. Now, they also had talked to cities like Baltimore, they also talked to Cincinnati, they had also talked to other areas like Portland, Seattle, and had also been in discussions with Pittsburgh as well. And I thought maybe one of those cities would most likely be the next street race, considering Pittsburgh had been in major talks and conversations to host a street race for 2026 as well. Well, it sounds like those formal talks about racing in San Diego, it sounds like they are picking up. According to Adam Stern, he mentioned this in the most recent article, NASCAR could and is already in talks to be racing in San Diego in 2026. This would be absolutely huge. While San Diego is not the biggest city in the California area, that being the Los Angeles area, it is still one of the 2 or 3 biggest markets you have in California. And I think racing in San Diego would make a lot of sense. A lot of people still live in that area. I think still over 1 million people still live in San Diego, and it's one of the more populated cities out there. Of course, got the San Diego Padres, which have been hit or miss this year, and it used to, of course, host the San Diego Chargers as well. Having a race in San Diego kind of close to the Bay, which is in the southern tip of California, would absolutely be a fantastic product. And I think they could be able to design a racetrack, which I think be able to put on a fantastic and great product. That being said, I hope this is the replacement for Chicago and we don't have 2 street races next in 2026. Because if you have 2 street races and you have the 5 road courses that are on the schedule, you're going to have potentially 7 road courses in 2025. In my opinion, 7 is way too many. I think you're reaching a little bit overkill on the road course side of things. I think the most road courses on a cup schedule that you should have, in my opinion, to create some balance is 6. So maybe then you can get rid of the Charlotte Roval, and then so you could have 2 street races, and so then you would have 6. But I think we're getting a little bit overkill when it comes to this. And there's rumors right now about NASCAR looking to also go to Interlagos in 2026 as well. So then if they're going to go to Interlagos, and if you have San Diego and still keep Chicago for 2026, you'll have 8 road courses in a season. And that, in my opinion, is crazy. We saw the Xfinity Series almost have a quarter of their season last year be on road courses altogether, like a third quarter of the year. And that's a little bit overkill there. I feel like that the maximum there should be is 6. That being said, I understand when NASCAR is looking to have street racing. It's been very successful. It's been really successful with Chicago the last few years. Yes, I know they had issues with rain this year, but I think racing in San Diego would be pretty much a no-brainer. They want to race in Southern California. That is one of the biggest markets out there in the country. Yes, I know people will say North Carolina is a bigger market, which I disagree. I think Southern California is a much massive and a much more bigger market. You've got to have a race in Southern California if you want the sport to succeed, in my opinion. I'm sorry, you just have to. And being in that California area makes a lot of sense. I think it is going to happen, in all honesty, where NASCAR does race in Southern California next year, 2026. The fact that they're in talks, the fact they're in major discussions, it makes a lot of sense. Now, where would you put San Diego on the schedule? Would you put it during the July 4th weekend? That'd be very interesting. Or could you somehow have this as part of the West Coast swing? Have it very early in the season in April. The problem is if you do it then, you've got the area where the games are going on and stuff with the Padres and all that. You kind of have to have it in that middle area. I guess you could do it during the summer technically, in early summer maybe, like in June or May. Maybe have it like the July 4th weekend. You could do that for sure. But I think racing in San Diego would make a lot of sense. Now, obviously, the street course concept's interesting. I think racing in Pittsburgh would also be very good, and I really hope and know that they're trying to get a race maybe in Pittsburgh in the future. But I don't know if they're going to have it in 26. I think Pittsburgh, it really wants it. It'd be a great area to go to as well. But I think also having a race in San Diego would also make a lot of sense. I know some will say we shouldn't be racing in California. We already are. We're racing at Sonoma. And maybe you could replace Sonoma. That could be an option. But Sonoma's been on the schedule now for 35 years at this point. I don't think they're getting rid of Sonoma. The only year they didn't run it, I believe, was 2020. And I don't see them getting rid of it anytime soon, considering they did have a pretty solid and pretty good race earlier this year. But I think it's very exciting nonetheless to see that they're in talks to race in San Diego for 2026. I think it's going to be very fun if it does end up happening. I think you get some pretty solid racing for sure. I think it'd be pretty fun. I hope it happens. I really hope we do get to race San Diego because I think racing in that area would be very fun. And I hope we do get to move the street cars concept to another area in 2026, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Christian Eckes and Kaulig Racing. Now, tomorrow morning around 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Kaulig Racing is going to be announcing their next driver for their NASCAR Xfinity Series program for 2025. Where I know that Daniel Dowd will be driving a 10 car for Kaulig Racing next year, replacing Shane Van Gisbergen, who of course will move up to the NASCAR Cup Series full-time with Trackhouse Racing. And we got confirmation at Daytona as well that Josh Williams will be driving the number 11 once again. Now the big question is, who is going to be driving this car? Well, last night, right before they went to bed, they put out a tweet basically indicating that they had basically someone signing a contract for next year. Now, some had thought maybe it was Zay Smith. Zay Smith, it looked like a Z to some people. Some had thought maybe Zay Smith was going to be the driver there. But Zay Smith, like I already mentioned, it sounds like after all might be headed to the front row. Some had thought about maybe Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton has reportedly had talks and conversations with Kaulig Racing, but from what I'm hearing, I think he will end up at a team like AM Racing next year. And then some have thought maybe it could be Ty Dillon. Ty Dillon's name, as I mentioned, is a major possibility to race full-time with Kaulig, but I think he will end up in a cup car with the team, most likely, instead of their NASCAR Xfinity program. So this really leaves only a few options you have on the table. Again, Daniel Hemrick, I mentioned, there is talk that he could go back to Xfinity next year, but from everything I'm hearing, Daniel Hemrick may not even be in the Kaulig organization all next year. It might just be out of the organization as a whole. The name that everybody is linking toward this ride for 2025 is Christian Eckes. Christian Eckes is rumored to maybe making a move to the Xfinity Series full-time for 2025 over the course of the last few months. Bob Pockerson mentioned back when he did the prospect section, and everyone like Breakcard, including myself, has heard this as a major, major possibility. I think him going to Kaulig would be a really great move. You need to bring someone in there that's really going to tie this program all together. No disrespect to Daniel Dye and Josh Williams. They're both talented race car drivers, but they're not drivers, in my opinion, that are just going to come into the organization and really set the world on fire. You need that franchise guy who's going to replace AJ Allmendinger, who of course is moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series once again with Kaulig Racing. You need that guy who's really going to come in there and really build your program up. And Christian Eckes is that guy, in my opinion, that could absolutely do it. Christian Eckes has had a very great year in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. He's won 3 races so far this year. Of course, won the regular season championship. He finished third in Milwaukee, and I think he deserves a chance to be promoted. There were talks of him going to Kaulig's Cup program or even front row at one point, because a lot of teams are looking at Christian. They see the talent. Now, the big thing that could hurt Christian long-term is funding. But I think he will have a little funding coming with him. I don't think Napa's moving up with him, because Napa has been a McAnally-Hilgeman sponsor for many years, and Bill McAnally wasn't the Hilgeman group. You just had Bill McAnally owning it. I think that they won't be going up with him. But I think if you're a team and you see the talent that Christian has, you've got to move him up. He is one of the top 3 prospects, in my opinion. I still think that Corey Haim and Connor Zillage are better prospects than Christian Eckes, but I think Christian is the third best prospect you have. And I think you look at this, he is going to come into this team, and I think he is going to perform exceptionally well and very, very great. So how do I think he's going to do in 2025? My predictions. Well, I think he is going to be a championship contender next year. I think he is going to be the best driver that Kaulig has is probably Shane this year, and I think he'll win a few races. I think he gets at least 2 or 3 victories next season, most likely in the Xfinity Series, because he can always get the best out of equipment, and I think he will be competing for the championship this year. I think he will at least for sure make the round of 8, especially since you got guys moving up, like, of course, Cole Custer, most likely Riley Herbst next year, and obviously Shane Van Gisbergen, who could win the championship. If things go his way this year, he could somehow still win the championship. And then you get about other guys who I think are going to be competitive in making other moves and other things. But I think Christian is a really talented race car driver who I think will do very well next year with Kaulig. He's always, like I said, gotten the best out of equipment, regardless of what series he ends up racing in, and I think he will be a championship contender next year. So what does it mean for the rest of the Xfinity silly season? Daniel Hemrick, like I mentioned, could be in Xfinity next year, but it does sound like that he's probably not going to be with Kaulig, unfortunately. Obviously, you've got the rumor of Williams to Wallace, Taylor Gray, and, of course, Brandon Jones going back to Joe Gibbs Racing next year. Chandler Smith has been linked to Front Row Motorsports for the NASCAR Cup Series, but I don't know if that move is going to happen. Sammy Smith and Justin Allgaier are expected to return to Junior Motorsports next year. That's been pretty much confirmed at this point by Bob Pockrass. You, of course, have Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Haley Deegan could still be in Xfinity next year, but it's unknown what she'll be doing for 2025. She still also could be headed over to the IndyCar side of things for next season as well. I think the rest of the Xfinity Series silly season is going to be very interesting to kind of see how everything kind of plays out. I think there's a lot of moves that are going to be happening very, very soon, but I do think Christian Eckes going to Kaulig Racing is pretty much a no-brainer. I think he'll be very solid next year, and I think he will be an outside championship contender for the 2025 season. I think he'll be very good. I think that'll be the driver who is announced tomorrow for 2025 to drive the number 16 car next season in the Xfinity Series. So, that is going to be for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts on today's episode. If you think Christian's going to Kaulig, let me your thoughts in the comments below. And do you want to see NASCAR race at San Diego? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. I don't know if there's any more videos today dropping on the channel. Tomorrow we're going to have the reactions to Cup qualifying. We're going to have the Christian Eckes video, most likely, whoever goes to Kaulig. We're also going to have an SVG video dropping. We're going to have the Xfinity review. And then, of course, on Sunday, we'll have the Cookout Southern 500 race review. And, of course, the starting lineup for that event. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.